Comics always want to know how long will it take or should it take for me to develop my comedic voice. All right, so let's talk about some different ideas about that. The first theory I've heard is the concept of 10,000 hours. It was in a book called Outliers that came out in 2008 by Malcolm Gladwell. And he put forth this idea that it takes 10,000 hours in any discipline to become an expert. And he used the Beatles as an example because they went to Hamburg, Germany. They did a bunch of gigs for years and rehearsals and all of that. That one doesn't work for comedy. If you think about it logically, if you do an hour-long show every night for a year, that's only 365 hours. If you add the writing in, you write an hour a day. Most comics don't. But if you did, then you're doubling that. You're still only at 740. So that's going to take you way more than 10 years, 10 or 20 years. Most comics aren't doing an hour a night, every night. Maybe if you're in New York City, that's probably the only place where you could go up that much. And that's a crazy thought to me. It sounds good on paper, but when you put the numbers behind it, it doesn't make much sense. So let's just kind of toss that out the window. When I started, I was doing open mics in 93. I was horrible. There was no instruction or anything like that. I didn't even have the Judy Carter book about how to be a comedian. So I was just doing what I thought comedians did. And I'd go to an open mic. After a few of them, it would be so bad I'd quit for 6 months. Then in 1996, I got real serious about it. Within, 8 months, I was on the road. So I wasn't at the peak level, but I was good enough to be working and working outside of my area. Now, in my case, it was kind of a cheat. And maybe that's not the right word, but I was a novelty act. In addition to my regular stand-up, the last 5 minutes I would do this Bill Clinton impression where I look so much like him and it's easy to sound like him. Clinton was president at the time. This is before Lewinsky, but it was big. So you bring a feature in who can also do radio and bring people into the club. It made sense for them to hire me. But I was still holding my own, and I got bumped up to co-headlining probably about maybe a year after that. But after I came off the road, I didn't feel like, I knew I was funny, but I didn't feel like I had settled in with what I was doing. I remember watching a guy that I worked with who was headlining, Robert Hawkins. He was so funny, I wanted to quit comedy. I'm like, I can't do what he's doing. So my development as a comedian was stunted because when I got to LA, I was doing it a lot, but I started getting writing jobs. So stand-up comedy wasn't my primary focus at that point. I was appearing on TV at least a couple of times a week on the Best Damn Sports Show, period. So I didn't have a traditional route in the sense that I didn't put in years and years and years and years and develop my voice and all that. So for me, I felt very confident in my act and how I perform my act. And 6 years after moving to Los Angeles, 5.5 years, I did the HBO Aspen Comedy Festival. I did Comedy Central's Premium Blend. So I felt, I know what I'm doing. I'm good. It wasn't until I moved back to my hometown in 2012 where I started developing who I am today on stage. So, and the big turn for me was going from wanting to get a great reaction and killing every time to caring less about the reaction and more about what I was saying. So I had a different level of confidence when I would go on stage because I wanted them to get me. I wanted them to understand what I found funny and convey it to them in a way that they would too. But if they didn't laugh, if it didn't kill every time, I wasn't as concerned. I would actually kind of tease the audience if they didn't get certain concepts, always knowing that it's my own responsibility. I have to do that. It's important to take from what's in here and get it into their head so that they see and comprehend exactly what it is you're trying to say, so that it makes them laugh, so that they can be in on the joke with you. But I've heard people say 7 years, 5 years, 10 years. It depends. That's the honest answer. It's different for everybody. So I'm going to give you an example. Bob Newhart, rest in peace. He's one of my favorite comics. And his story about getting into stand-up comedy is insane. If you think about where you're at in your journey and where I was at when I started, he worked in advertising, I believe in Chicago, and he used to do these bits with a friend of his on the phone, and they would do like a comedy routine between each other. And he got pretty good at it, but he's not going up in front of an audience. His buddy dropped out, so he just started doing both sides of the conversation, which if you watch any Bob Newhart, he does the famous phone calls where you just hear his reactions on one end of a phone conversation. And he started recording them. And he started sending them out to different record companies that carried comedians. Well, he got it to Warner Brothers, and they flipped. They said, "This is so good, we want to make an album with you, and we'll record it live at your next stand-up gig." He had never done stand-up before. Ever. So he had to find a venue. He found one in Texas, and he went out there and opened for, I think, a husband and wife act. You can look all this stuff up. I know it kind of innately, and I looked it up recently, but I don't know if he spent a month working with them at this place, or if it was a week or a few nights. I do know the first time that he did it, he had 18 minutes of bits of material. And he finished his last one. The crowd was going crazy. He comes off the stage, and the stage manager says, "You have to go back out there. When they're clapping like that, you have to go give them more." So he went back out there and said, "Okay, which one do you want to hear again?" Because he didn't have any other material. So he thought he was going to do another one again. And then when they finally came, again, I keep saying again. When he finally recorded his album over the 2 nights, they pressed it into a record, and it became #1 in the country. Not just #1 for comedy records at the time, it was the #1 album in the country. He's probably going up against Frank Sinatra and all the other acts in the 50s. I mean, how long did it take him to find his comedic voice? Probably a little while when he was doing the bits with his friend, but imagine doing a month of stand-up, and next thing you know, you have the #1 record in the entire country. Pretty insane. It didn't take him 10,000 hours. It didn't take him 3 years or 5 years or 7 years or 10 years. I'm not Bob Newhart. I'm guessing you're not either. But the way you can tell that you're finding your voice and that you're getting really good is with the opportunities that start coming to you. First of all, it's a feeling. You kind of know. You get a little bit cocky. And especially if you know the material's not hacky, it's original, and you can kind of just perform it with ease. So you're up there on stage, you do the setup for a bit, and you can just kind of hang back, not worrying about them being quiet or jumping ahead, and you know you're going to land that punchline. And it's like, boom. And then you pause and kind of daydream, and then you throw out a tag. Like, it's a masterful control of your performance, of the timing, of the delivery. When you start getting opportunities from people who know. So if somebody from your work says, hey, we should have you for the Christmas show, the Christmas party, and book you for that. That's not necessarily indicative of how good or bad you are as a comic. That just means somebody you know says, oh, this is the only comedian I know in the world. We should hire you to do this show. But if a club owner or booker says, hey, I'd like you to feature at the club, or I'd like you to come in and headline for a weekend, those are the measuring points that you can kind of track. There'll be those pivotal moments. For me, it was, early on getting to MC at my local club. That let me know I had something there. But then when I started doing the road and I was asked to come back to those clubs, and then I moved up at some of them to headline or co-headline, that's when I knew, all right, I don't have imposter syndrome anymore. I can legitimately do this. When you start getting gigs that you feel like maybe you're not ready for, that's usually the people with ego, and they think, oh, I should be doing this, doing that. That happens. That certainly happened with me, but it's when I would get opportunities when I'm like, whoa, I don't know if I'm ready. Somebody believed in me. They knew that I had found my voice. So that's a better way of telling those two things, the way you feel about what you're talking about and how you deliver it and the originality of your material. When other comics will come up to you and recite one of your jokes back to you, instead of saying just good set, which doesn't mean anything except I don't want to get into it with you, when they go, oh, that one line you do about this, those are the things that will guide you along with all of this. When you start feeling, you'll feel it. I guess that's the main point. You'll feel it. And so I know why comics want to have a timeline set on it, because you don't want to just be at open mics and think this is never going to pay off. But that could be what happens. So what you can do is to flip it and actually put yourself in more control, is write more, rehearse more, go out and perform more. In my first video, I told you about how Bill Burr said, hey, if you want to be a comedian, you got to go out every night you possibly can and write every single day. It's like lifting weights. You're never going to get bigger if you don't stay in the gym. So you can knock a lot of that time off by getting better, by putting the reps in, and expand your mind. If you have a joke about how dating is so hard, write the opposite. Dating is easy. Find something original, something you're deeply interested in, so that you can convey that information and find the funny angle on it. I hope this all makes sense. I'll see you in the next video.